Science is a way of thinking, much more than it is a body of knowledge. That's Carl Sagan. A really powerful quote, I think, and it sets the stage perfectly for our deep dive today. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we really try to get beneath the surface of complex topics, pull out those surprising facts, those critical insights that, help you stay truly informed. Today, we're tackling something huge, the global heating crisis. It's getting worse, and paradoxically, the demand for cooling is just skyrocketing alongside it. It's this strange loop where the solution, cooling, often seems to, well, make the underlying problem worse. Fascinating, but also pretty urgent.
Absolutely. And our mission here is to critically dig into some key insights from a recent ORF publication on this very topic. Now, this isn't just for general awareness, though that's vital for everyone, obviously, but for those of you perhaps studying for exams like the UPSC mains or prelims, this is particularly relevant. It touches on core current affairs, environmental science, things that pop up frequently. So we'll pull out the key nuggets, look at different angles, and really try to connect the dots for you.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's hard to ignore. Global temperatures aren't just creeping up, they're smashing records. Every year seems hotter. We're only in early 2025, and already we're seeing limits pushed, right? Unprecedented heat waves in some places, way earlier than usual. And this relentless heat, it directly means we all need more cooling. Simple as that. You feel it yourself, right? When it gets baking hot, what's the first instinct? Flick on the AC.
Exactly. And that instinct, multiplied across the globe, leads to some staggering numbers. Air conditioning already accounts for, get this, over 10% of global electricity use. And the projections, if we just carry on as we are, that figure could double by 2050.
Double, wow.
Yeah, that's a massive, massive strain on energy grids that are often already struggling.
India, of course, is right there on the front lines, dealing with intense heat. And the sources we looked at mentioned some immediate steps being considered. Things like incentives for energy-efficient appliances, makes sense. And also plans maybe to limit AC temperature settings, like keeping them between 20 degrees and 28 degrees Celsius. On the face of it, these seem logical, right? Sensible steps. But are they really getting to the heart of the problem? Or could there be, unintended side effects?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads us straight into this really interesting counterintuitive effect. Maximizing energy efficiency sounds great, obviously, but it could, weirdly, lead to people using their ACs for longer periods during heat waves. It ties directly into something called Jevons Paradox. Ever heard of it?
Vaguely, remind me.
So the basic idea is that when technology makes using a resource more efficient, and therefore cheaper per use, consumption of that resource might actually increase, not decrease. Think about it. If your AC costs less to run per hour because it's super efficient, maybe you'll leave it on all day instead of just during the peak heat. Or maybe more people can now afford to buy and run an AC who couldn't before.
Ah, right. So individual efficiency doesn't automatically mean less total consumption.
Precisely. It's about the overall system behavior, not just the individual unit.
Yeah.
Widespread affordability can just open the floodgates.
That really does complicate things. More efficient equals better isn't always the full story. And beyond the energy map, there's a huge human side to this. Affordable cooling isn't a luxury when temperatures soar. It's critical for health. But you walk around cities, AC units are mostly in wealthier homes, offices. There's a massive equity gap.
A huge one. And it's not just about being uncomfortable. It's genuinely life-threatening now. The data shows heat exposure is a bigger killer than ever. Look at New Delhi, for example. Summer heat waves, there aren't just news headlines. They tragically cause hundreds of deaths. And it's made worse by the urban heat island effect, cities trapping heat.
Yeah.
And who suffers most? It's not people in air-conditioned buildings.
No.
It's the vast majority often the urban poor rural communities who don't have AC. They face the health crises, the lost workdays, the real danger. It's a profound injustice baked into the climate crisis.
There is this point about a self-perpetuating cycle that really stuck with me. It basically says that as newer, efficient ACs get cheaper, more people buy them. But that increased adoption, even of efficient units, could lead to higher overall emissions. So my individual energy saving could actually contribute to a bigger global problem if everyone does it without thinking about the bigger picture. That's unsettling. It sounds like Jevons Paradox on a terrifying global scale.
It really is. It's exactly that kind of complex feedback loop. It demands, we think systemically, not just about individual devices. Like you said, affordability drives adoption. More units running, even efficient ones, especially if run for longer, means more total energy demand. More demand often means more emissions, depending on the energy source. So making individual ACs greener isn't enough if we don't tackle the rising demand for cooling itself and push for truly sustainable alternatives for everyone.
Okay, so if energy efficiency alone isn't the magic answer, the silver bullet, where do we go next? What about the next generation of cooling? We clearly need something beyond just tweaking current systems, especially given the refrigerants they use. Those have their own problems, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the next critical layer. The dominant technology now is vapor compression, VC systems. And their big drawback is their reliance on hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. These aren't just mild greenhouse gases. They're incredibly potent. Some have global warming potentials, GWPs, literally thousands of times higher than carbon dioxide.
Thousands, wow.
Yeah. So even tiny leaks from millions of units add up to a huge climate impact. They accelerate the very warming we're trying to escape with the cooling.
That really puts the pressure on. Thankfully, there are international moves to deal with this, like the Kaggali Amendment.
Yes, exactly. The Kaggali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. It's a global agreement aiming for an accelerated phase-down of HFC production and use. Crucially, it's been ratified by 155 nations now.
That sounds significant.
It is hugely significant. If implemented fully, estimates suggest Kigali could prevent somewhere between 60% and, get this, maybe even up to 96% of predicted HFC emissions by 2050.
That's enormous potential.
It really is a major climate win. And there are alternatives being pushed, like the refrigerant R290. It's essentially propane. It has zero ozone-depleting potential and a much, much lower GWP compared to HFCs.
Yeah.
And it's a big, but shifting technologies isn't easy or cheap.
Right. Affordability.
Always. New tech often costs more upfront. In very price-sensitive markets, like many developing nations, switching to R290 or other alternatives is tough without financial help, without incentives, without technical support to handle things like flammability safely.
So access to the funding and the know-how is key for a just transition globally.
Absolutely critical.
Which makes things like passive cooling even more important in the meantime, right? While we figure out the high-tech, scalable solution.
Exactly. Don't underestimate passive strategies. Smart building design, natural ventilation, green roofs, reflective surfaces, these can make a huge difference, often at lower cost, and should always be the first line of defense.
Okay, but looking beyond passive, what about those potential game changers? The sources mentioned some really futuristic sounding tech.
Yeah, there's some exciting stuff in development. One major area is solid-state cooling. Think thermoelectric cooling, sometimes called elastocaloric cooling.
Solid state, so no gases, no liquids.
Pretty much. The basic idea is using electricity to move heat across junctions of specific solid materials, semiconductors, usually. No traditional refrigerants needed at all. It works on principles like the Peltier effect, run electricity through two different materials, one side gets hot, the other gets cold, or the Seebeck effect, the reverse. The potential is huge. Zero GWP from refrigerants, potentially much higher efficiency than current systems.
Sounds amazing. Like, why isn't this everywhere already? What's the catch?
Well, scaling it up faces hurdles. A big one is the supply chain for the specialized materials needed, like bismuth telluride or even copper in some designs. Production of these materials is often concentrated in just a few places globally. That creates risks, geopolitical tensions, price volatility that can disrupt manufacturing and make it expensive.
Ah, so it's not just the science, it's the global economics and resource politics too.
Always part of the equation with new hardware. Getting a stable, diverse, affordable supply chain for these next-gen materials is a major challenge we need to solve.
Got it. Any other big innovations on the horizon?
Another promising avenue is solar-driven adsorption chillers. These use heat, potentially directly from solar thermal collectors, to drive a cooling cycle using adsorbent materials. Their big plus is reducing reliance on the electricity grid, which is massive for regions where power is unreliable or expensive, common in many parts of the developing world. Imagine cooling powered directly by the sun.
That sounds ideal for sunny, hot climates.
Potentially, yes. But again, challenges remain. The upfront investment can be significant, both for the units and maybe supporting infrastructure. And like many new technologies, there's likely to be a lag before they become truly affordable and accessible for the most vulnerable communities who need them most. Bridging that financial gap is key.
Which brings us squarely to policy and governance. Because all this tech innovation is great, but it needs the right framework to actually happen, right? Especially integrating heat adaptation into climate goals like in India.
Absolutely. Policy is make or break. India's landscape is interesting here. You see some steps forward, but also gaps. For instance, the revised e-waste rules from 2026. They mandate recovering refrigerants from old ACs when they're discarded. Good idea. in
Oh,
principle.
yeah, yeah.
But the sources point out a critical lack of enforcement mechanisms for safe processing. Just collecting them isn't enough if they aren't then destroyed or recycled properly, preventing leaks. You need the infrastructure and oversight. There's also talk of new scrappage policies, the government considering ways to encourage phasing out ACs older than, say, 6 years. They're getting input from big companies like Blue Star, LG, Samsung on how that might work.
Trying to get those older, less efficient, potentially HFC leaking units out of circulation.
Exactly. Incentivizing upgrades.
And then there's the tax issue, the GST on air conditioners. That came up.
Yes, that's a really interesting policy lever, or perhaps a barrier. Currently, ACs in India face a 28% goods and services tax. That's the highest slab, usually reserved for luxury goods.
Regardless of efficiency or type.
Seems so. Splitter window, doesn't matter. And you could argue pretty strongly, I think, that in a rapidly warming world, especially in a hot country like India, access to affordable, sustainable cooling is becoming less of a luxury and more of a necessity for health, for work, for basic well-being.
Just maybe policy needs to shift perspective from luxury item to essential service.
That recognition could be a crucial first step. Meanwhile, India does have its cooling action plan, Isapp, launched over 6 years ago. It aims to boost efficiency, reduce refrigerant demand, all good goals. But we circle back to Jevons Paradox. Are efficiency gains being offset by increased usage? And crucially, are these efforts reaching the urban and rural poor who suffer most from heat but still find ACs completely out of reach? That equity gap persists.
Right. So looking wider now internationally, are there global agreements pushing this forward beyond just Kaggali?
Yes. There's the Global Cooling Pledge. It emerged from COP28, actually, endorsed by over 80 countries now. It sets ambitious targets, like strengthening minimum energy performance standards, MEPS, globally, and pushing faster refrigerant phase-downs. The key thing, though, as always with these pledges, is turning words into action. Countries need to cooperate beyond just signing documents. The goal mentioned is enforcing MEPS for 90% of cooling equipment sold globally by 2030. That's ambitious. It needs shared tech, financial support for developing nations. Real concerted effort.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, the technology, the policy, the equity issues, what are the biggest hurdles remaining for truly sustainable cooling for everyone? It sounds incredibly complex.
It is multifaceted, definitely. We have these promising emerging technologies, thermoelectric, solar chillers that could grab significant market share maybe within a decade. But making them accessible, truly widespread, that depends entirely on policymakers in the private sector moving fast enough, keeping pace with the innovation. The transition, whether it's to climate-friendlier refrigerants like R290 or to totally new systems like solid state, won't be frictionless. There will likely be higher upfront costs, maybe different operational needs. So you need timely action, serious financial investment, especially for poorer countries, and readily available technical skills and knowledge transfer. And all this has to go hand in hand with maximizing passive cooling first. It's about building resilience overall, cooling people without cooking the planet.
Wow. This deep dive really highlights that intricate dance, doesn't it? Between rising heat, our energy demands, incredible innovation, but also the absolute necessity of smart, fair policies. Understanding these connections, these nuances, it's not just academic or even just for exam prep. It feels essential for figuring out how we navigate the climate future, how we build a world that's, well, livable and equitable for everyone.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave people with, building on this. Given we clearly need this systemic shift, this move away from just tweaking the old ways, what kind of really innovative policy levers, beyond just taxes or efficiency rules, could genuinely speed up the adoption of these next-gen sustainable cooling solutions for everybody? Not just those who can easily afford the latest tech. How do we ensure this transition is fast and fair? That's the big question, I think.
That is a fantastic question to ponder. A lot to think about there. We really hope this discussion has given you valuable insights today, whether you are indeed preparing for UPSC exams and needed that critical analysis of current affairs, or if you're just someone keen to understand the major challenges and opportunities shaping our world. If you found this useful, please do give this deep dive a like, subscribe to the deep dive for more explorations like this, and definitely leave us a comment. Any questions you have, topics you'd like us to tackle, whether for exam focus or general knowledge, we really want to hear from you. Thanks for joining us.